Welcome, everybody, to episode 79 of VR Roundtable. My name is Anthony, and this week it is the three amigos. I'm joined by Chris and Gary, and I'll send it over to Gary first. Gary, what is the latest?
Not too much to report, unfortunately. It's been a very mundane week for me. So I've been playing a little bit of Skyrim, and I'm sure we'll get onto that later on. But other than that, not too much to report, unfortunately.
What about your van? Did they ever find the thing, or
That's gone. I've not heard anything from the
mist.
police. Yeah, I've not heard anything from it all. So, but that's okay. The thieves have won. So, I just, the insurance company have paid out. So it's all good from my point of view. It's not good on the whole, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe eventually you'll be driving along and you'll see a van and the door will look very familiar, or you'll see some other van and it's like, man, that hood on that van looks really familiar.
Believe me, every time I see a very similar van, I'm just double taking all the time as I'm driving around. But yeah,
they've probably moved the parts all over the place. So that's a lot of times what happens is here in California, oh my God, like I've owned a lot of Hondas or like Toyotas. And they're the most popular cars for these people to grab, because really what they're doing is they're like repairing somebody's Honda and they need a hood, and it's the cheapest way is grab a car, take the hood, and then it's 100% profit. And it's just crazy how that is here. But let's send it over to Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good. That's crazy. I have a Honda. I got to be more careful, I guess. I'm good. I have a team working on a game called Rubber Rapids right now in my college class, which is a game where you use like 4 Wii Fit balance boards as like being in inner tubes, and then you go down a river and like bump them, and it's kind of like Mario Kart. So that's been fun to work on to help produce. So that's really what I've been up to, just kind of helping with that game. I'll have to send you guys a copy.
Oh, that sounds sweet. Yeah. Hey, Chris, like did you ever hear that game Primordian was basically made by one dude? Like crazy. when you hear about something like that, don't you think, man, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. This guy made Primordian all by his damn self.
Yeah, I think that's really crazy. There's certain people like in my college that are just ridiculously better than others. So I could see how like one of those guys could just make their own game. But yeah. Probably a team will hopefully make a better game usually.
Yeah. Okay. So guys, this week, I got to tell you, the news is on the light side of things. It's kind of like a GDC hangover, basically, because we had GDC last week. And so lots of stuff happened. And then once they pack that up, it's like, okay, nothing's going on. So it's pretty slow. But we did have PAX East this week in Boston, Massachusetts, and Oculus was there, and they were showing off a number of games. They had what they call their Oculus Game Days, and it's kind of advertised as like 5 new games that they were showing off, but I don't know exactly how new all of them are, but we can talk about them real briefly. So basically they had demonstrations for Vacation Simulator, which is, we've seen this, but it's a chance for the public really to get their first crack at trying out Vacation Simulator. And then, of course, Space Junkies by Ubisoft, which is looking pretty good. And this is one of these games where it's kind of flying under the radar because we've heard about it for so long. I think it was announced at last E3. And back then it kind of got buried because everybody was more excited about Lone Echo, and it almost seemed like a Me Too Lone Echo thing in terms of the locomotion, the 0G part of it. But it's shaping up pretty nicely. That was there. And then they had 3 other games that might not have as much recognition. We have Vox Machine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Does anybody know how that's pronounced?
No, I was thinking the same thing. Is it Machine or Machine? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably Machine. Because you guys remember that movie Ex Machina or Ex Machina or whatever? Okay, that is a good ass movie. Did you guys both see that movie?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think that
really
is
thumbs up. You know what? I just a little side tangent on that movie. I wonder if anybody else was like me, where when at the very end when she like gets in the helicopter and flies away, I'm like, okay, I want to see this movie. I want to see her going into regular reality. I want to see that movie, But yeah, I like that one. But anyway, so Vox Machina, if I can actually talk, is kind of it's like a mech warrior game, multiplayer mech warrior game, kind of go anywhere. We did have Archangel a while back, and everybody complained about, it being on rails and all that. So here's the opposite of that. So we do have that. And then the two other ones, these ones probably were the least known of the 5. We have a game called Blind, and then we also have Paper Valley. Is it Paper Valley? I don't have the names in front of me here. Paper. Okay, yeah. And so, these 5 different games were shown off. I'll go ahead and kick it over to Chris. Chris, of these particular 5 games, like if you were at PAX East yourself, and let's say all 5 of these were lined up, no lines at any one of them, you could go to any one of them. Which one would you be wanting to sample first?
I'd probably want to see the Vox Machina. I don't know. We just call it Vox from now on until we're positive. But I think that one looks really good. I've seen some like gameplay of like demos of that. That thing's been around for a while, but it's good to see it's kind of eventually turning into a game now. So I think that's probably my number one. And then Blind just looks really cool. I think you were talking before the show, and like the trailer came out like 2 years ago or something. So it must have been in development for a long time. But just based on the trailer, like I haven't even seen the trailer before this, but it looks super duper interesting and unique with the art style and everything. So I bet that would be really fun to try. But I guess I'm just gonna have to wait for that to come out.
Yeah, Blind is it's using like echolocation, and so I believe what it does is it uses your microphone, and so if you make noises, then it kind of it's basically very similar to this game Stifled. Now, Stifled was on PlayStation VR. It was supposed to come to the Vive and Rift. I haven't heard anything about it in a long time. That game is from Gatai Games, but it uses echolocation where, like, if you make any kind of noise, it's like sending a ping out into the world, and then you kind of get like a wireframe look at things. And Gary, did you ever play Stifled?
I didn't. No. I did see, and I was sort of looking on with interest when you and Steve were both talking about this game, because it did look pretty interesting to me, but I never got around to actually playing it. But yeah, you're right. Blind looks very similar in some ways to it, but I think when you look at the trailer, it seems to be doing some slightly different things in terms of the puzzles and that kind of stuff. So, and also the mystery behind it, because the trailer really plays on this mystery of why you're doing everything within this world. But yeah, it looks pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, and then the last one, the Paper Valley one, I was just wondering if anybody, when you first get Oculus, or when most people first get Oculus, one of the things that a lot of people will sample is Dream Deck. And Dream Deck has, it has the T-Rex demo, and it has a couple of different little interactive demos. And there's one of them in there where it's like you're by a river or something, and it's like super colorful, and there's like a fox, and everything looks like it's kind of made out of paper mache or something like that. And I remember seeing that and thinking, oh man, I wish they made a game out of this whole world. And when I first saw Paper Valley, I kind of got that feel from it, and I thought, oh, if this was that would be awesome. But it's a little bit different. But Chris, did you get a chance to check out the Paper Valley trailer? What do you think about that? Because this one is actually, it's funny because I saw a video on it where they're using nothing but Vive controllers. And then now we hear it's an exclusive Oculus Rift release on April 19th, which I'm sure some Vive people are going to see the Vive controllers and be like, hey, what's going on here, man? You started off with the Vive controllers and now you screwed us.
Yeah. Man, it's really cool just looking at the mechanic of like the paper airplane throwing. Like that's a really neat idea just to make puzzles around that. But it looks super duper colorful. Like you said, it really does look like that Dream Deck demo,
Yeah, it does look relaxing, and I mean it's questionable if it's going to be like a real gamer game, type of thing, but more kind of relaxing and calm, which does look pretty cool. But yeah, so basically we had these 5 games that were shown off at Oculus Days. That's pretty much most of the news that came out of PAX East, as far as I can tell. And another big story that we do have, though, is going back to the HTC Vive Pro. And that has been arriving. Everybody's getting their HTC Vive Pros now, although it seems to be kind of sold out everywhere. And I was just on Reddit before the show, and one of the things that somebody was talking about is there's HTC Vive Pros on eBay that are selling for like $1,500. Did you guys know this or hear about this? Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, because if you go to like Amazon or a lot of the different places where you can order an HTC Vive Pro, they're sold out. So much for it being ridiculously, well, I mean, they probably had a very small run initially. But the reason it's in the news again this week is because they now have basically almost the equivalency of a legitimate bundle. This was something everybody was crying about and screaming about. We got the $800 a la carte price, but then if you're a new customer, if you're just coming to the Vive now and you want to jump in, you buy separate controllers, separate base stations. By the time you're done with that, your price is ballooning. So everybody wanted to have some type of bundle, and it's a couple of weeks ago, or I don't know, maybe 10 days ago or something, we heard about this accessory pack where if you were on the HTC Vive website and you put an HTC Vive Pro into your cart, a little special thing popped up that showed this little accessory starter kit that was like $450 or something like that. And it was saving you maybe $80, $90 off buying everything individually, but it wasn't that big of a savings. And then so because of such an outpouring of complaints about pricing, it seems like HTC, they kind of huddled into a boardroom and said, hey, what can we do to create a positive spin here? And then so on their 2-year anniversary on April 5th, which they've now hit their 2-year anniversary, they've said that they're going to have this new $300 special accessory bundle for HTC Vive Pro buyers, which basically gives us a new full package kind of for $1,100. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to Gary. Gary, do you think this makes up for a lot of the confusion and drama over the pricing, or I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about this new $1,100 kit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best we could have hoped for. It's still too expensive. I mean, let's be honest. It's just too expensive for the what they're asking for in terms of an upgrade, and then to pay this $300 on top to get the sensors. To me, it's just too expensive. I don't know, really, honestly. We can keep talking about this week on week about the price of the Vive Pro and this kind of stuff. I think it just comes back to the fact it's just too expensive for what this upgrade is. And honestly, it's getting a little bit tiresome to keep going on about the price, but I think that's what it comes down to. The fact is, we have these devices now, the Oculus Rift, the PSVR, and even the original Vive are now very reasonable prices. And then you've got this other product, which is just too expensive for what it is. So, people who want to purchase this, I think it's great that people have this option, but I don't think it's great for VR on the whole. I think it's too expensive for a majority to progress VR. And I think, for what it adds overall is an advantage, it's not enough. So, yeah, it's disappointing. I think it's good that they've done this, but it's disappointing that overall.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to kick it to you, but what I'm going to ask you, Chris, is like one of the things that HTC must be relatively pleased by is everybody is reviewing the HTC Vive Pro. I mean, you've got Tested reviewing it, every little website, The Verge, Engadget, seems like everybody has a review for the HTC Vive Pro. And the general gist of these reviews are, it's nice, it's good, but it's a little too expensive, and maybe it's not the jump that we wanted to get. But if you're HTC, you got to be pretty pleased that you're getting so much free publicity and advertising, even with your high price and all of that, because every website seemingly has a story about the HTC Vive Pro.
Yeah, I think everyone's super interested in just like knowing what the next generation of VR is. So it makes sense. I feel like a lot of people have been clicking on those articles. I know we have. Like we've been looking at the reviews of them. We definitely all want to try it. It's just cool, I guess, to get that glimpse, and I think it does help HTC a lot, just getting their name back out into the market. Because right now, like it's basically just been dominated by Oculus every single day. So it's cool that they're kind of getting that spotlight on them for a little bit. I was gonna mention they've sweetened the pack-in offer by offering a $100 Viveport content credit and an extended Viveport subscription of 1 year if you buy a Vive Pro. So wow, now the whole ball game's changed. Just kidding, but yeah, I just think it's funny that they're kind of giving a nod that it's a little expensive. They're like, all right, well, we're gonna give some more money to people, and I don't know, it's still too expensive, but I think it is good that they're getting back in the news. They just gotta lower this price, but.
What do you think though? Like, what if HTC that very first day, what if they originally, do you think it would have been better for them if they had announced this full bundle for 1,100 right then? Or do you think that would have been even worse?
I mean, in terms of money, it might have been worse because I bet people who didn't have one had to buy like a Vive or buy all the accessories and that. So they probably did make some more money initially, not having it as a bundle. But if they're money hungry, that would make sense. But I don't really know why they wouldn't have done that from the beginning, because they totally had the capacity to. It's kind of weird.
All right. And then, so one of the next stories we're going to go ahead and get into real quick is Beat Saber has been dated for May 1st. This is a game that we've been anticipating for a while. I'm guessing that both Chris and Gary, you guys have seen the trailers for this game. We have a number of rhythm action games already in VR. We've got Audio Shield, we've got Soundboxing, there's Airtone, there's Thumper, there's probably many more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now. But I think all of us have seen these trailers, and maybe the trailers make the game look a million times better than it really is, but the trailers really do make the game look good. I don't know if it's the combination of the music or the way it's the mixed reality video footage that just makes it look really cool. But Chris, are you into rhythm action games in the first place? And if you're not, or if you are, how hyped are you for Beat Saber? Is this going to be a game you're going to try to grab?
Yeah, I do love me some rhythm games. Like I've played so much Audio Shield in the past. Like when it finally came out with that update after so long, I was so happy because it was basically broken at that point before that update. But yeah, I remember I used to just be like having people come tour my room last year because I had like a really nice dorm room, and I would just be like playing Audio Shield. It'd be hilarious. But yeah, just looking at the trailer of this, it looks super cool. Just kind of that lightsaber effect is really neat. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it might be a little less cool than it looks in the videos, but I'm still really excited for it. I'll definitely pick it up and try it. It really just comes down to the song selection for me, and like if it's possible to make your own music and like have user shared stuff, because I'm not sure about that. I think that's like a big part in these rhythm games. If you just have like 5 tracks or something, then I don't know, it's not worth it anymore. Yeah.
I agree actually with that last point, because I think it's the user created content. It's the kind of stuff like in Soundboxing. I really think that makes that game to play through these songs, these obscure songs. You can do a search for quite obscure songs on Soundboxing and find that some people have actually gone through the motions of actually creating a game for you to play through. And this, I've said it before, numerous times, I'm not a huge fan of rhythm games at all, but this one does look pretty good. And I think it's the level of satisfaction you get. And I think they have value in terms of like VR fitness. We're constantly hearing about all these things of VR fitness and that kind of stuff. And I think this is great for that kind of thing. But yeah, this is probably, from what I'm seeing in the trailers, it probably looks like one of the better rhythm games within VR. But, I'm interested to try it. I'm not a huge fan, but if this one can win me over, then I'm definitely receptive to it.
Well, one of the interesting things about Beat Saber, though, is like one of the things we've been, we always talk about killer app. It's kind of a played out topic, killer app, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that is interesting about Beat Saber is we're always looking towards all these flat gamers that haven't made the jump to VR yet. and we're wondering, when is there going to be a game where it's like, oh man, where flat gamers are genuinely jealous of VR for, we have a certain game, they would really want to play it. And this game, like on social media and like the different, like I read somewhere that this game, the amount of views that some of the videos got or something was like right up there with like Fortnite. I mean, that is just crazy to me, you know. So this thing is kind of, I mean, it's gotten out there. And so if this game is really as good as it appears, and if we have like a lot of big YouTubers playing this and doing it in mixed reality and making it look really cool, you know, could this be an unlikely killer app? Chris, what do you think?
I don't really think it will be, just because it's so tiny. But yeah, I mean, you never know. I do think it'll give a lot more exposure to VR if you have all these YouTubers jumping on, which it sounds like is a really big possibility just with how cool it looks. I know like YouTubers just like, I want this to look cool, and this game definitely delivers on that. So I do think it'll give a lot of exposure to this game. This game will probably be really successful versus other rhythm games, but probably not a killer app. I don't know. For rhythm people, it might be.
I want to talk just quickly about this killer app thing, because we talk about it all the time, how there's these killer apps, and there has been examples of it. I'm not saying that there's not been examples of killer apps in the past. I just wonder whether this is valid for this day and age. I don't know. What is the killer app for the iPhone, for example? I don't know if there is a killer app for an iPhone. It's just
Angry Birds.
Yeah, but as a device, I think it's a all-encompassing device. That's the killer app. It's the device itself, and I think VR really is the killer app for itself. It doesn't need a piece of software necessarily to take it to the mainstream. And I know there's been examples of killer apps in the past, but I don't know whether that's even possible in this day and age. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the web has kind of been the killer app for computers and the iPhone and all these things. So I don't think that they're going to reinvent some kind of killer app for VR. I think just once the web works in VR, once you can like just type in a URL or however they make it work and go to different places without downloading software, I think that could maybe be the killer app. But I think it's already exists. Like we could already kind of predict that once the web could get to VR, it would naturally be something that a lot of people would want to do. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah, I mean, my take on the killer app thing is it's more, I think it's just more of a psychological thing. You want to have this one thing that you can kind of point to and be like, oh yeah, it has that, you know, like the Switch has like Mario, whatever it is, you know, like there's this one thing like, oh yeah, that has that, you know, that one thing. And it's been a while. Yeah, we don't see killer apps in the way that we used to see them. But I mean, as somebody that goes way back in the day, I remember when Super Mario 64 was out for the Nintendo 64, or even before the Nintendo 64 was out, and they had like little demo stations at like Toys R Us or whatever. And people would walk by and they would just be like, you know, look at Mario jumping onto a tree. This looks like a cartoon. I mean, we look at it nowadays and it's kind of ancient, but back at that time, it was like 1996 or something back when that was going on. And you saw Mario and that was a killer app. There's no question.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think that's sort of a product of that time, though, because back then, like from the 80s to through the 90s, we had generations of systems where there was such a radical difference in terms of the fidelity, the graphical fidelity and this kind of stuff, whereas we don't see that now. And I can't really think of like a killer app for PS4 or Xbox One or anything like that. They've just sort of continued what has gone before, and they're sort of riding on that wave. And whether killer apps can exist in this day and age, I don't know. And I don't know what the difference is necessarily. I don't know whether there's a fundamental difference that we can't have killer apps now, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, also you go ahead.
Well, just real quick, I was just going to say, like, yeah, PS4 and Xbox One. See, the problem with these systems is they're mostly just taking existing games and making them look better, which is nice. But I would say Fortnite maybe now is like the killer app for those things now. But if you go back to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, I would make the argument that very early in the life of those systems, on Xbox 360, I think Gears of War, the very first Gears of War, I mean, we might not look back on that as a killer app, but at that time, I think it was this game you put on a pedestal, and like people be like, oh yeah, Xbox has Gears of War. And then PlayStation 3 had Uncharted. And so even though they might not neatly fit into a box that says killer app and they fully represent that, if they kind of, it's just something to put on the pedestal. And I think PlayStation VR right now with Wipeout, they kind of have that. If Sony would recognize that and have commercials and stuff, I think it would help. But yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think the question is whether we consider VR systems like consoles or like productivity where you can play games on them too. Because for PC, you don't really have a killer app. You might have a killer app for the gaming side, but like the PC itself, the killer app is just all the things you can do on it. So since the VR is kind of like a PC, is it more that way, or is it more like you have this one game that would sell the system? Because I could argue that I feel like the Rift is just as useful for productivity with Oculus Dash and all those things.
You're absolutely right, and this is sort of I sort of have thought this in the past, but I think you've hit the nail on the head there. This is not just gaming. This is a whole, like a way of computing that's completely different. And I think that's the point to make. It's not just, we won't see one game that will make everybody jump into VR. It will be a whole range of things, productivity and gaming that will be the killer app. And I don't think for me, I don't think there'll be one thing in particular, but yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, Beat Saber will be arriving on May 1st. And, well, I was going to ask you guys real quick, like what price, because we don't know what price this game is going to have. And do you think that, like, is pricing going to be important for this game? Like, could they price themselves out of mainstream appeal? I mean, I'm sure that the company that's making this, Hyperbolic Magnetism, I believe, is the developer behind this. And they're a small developer. These guys, I believe they're from the Czech Republic, although I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's like a couple of guys from the Czech Republic. And I mentioned this before, but I think these guys are going to be rolling around in some Lamborghinis or some Ferraris in the near future, if they price this the right way. Chris, you are a fan of these games to a degree, but like, if this was $39.99, are you like, hell with that? But if it's like $29.99, you're probably on board, or where do you draw the cutoff line there?
I don't know. I think for me, it's probably, if it's $10, it's an instant buy. If it's 15, it's probably 20 might even be too much, just because I don't know how many songs there are. If I know there's like 100 songs, maybe I could go for like $29.99. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Anything above that is just ridiculous. I feel like $10 would be perfect. Every VR owner would have it, and they'd make a lot of money off that.
I don't think $10 is going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen.
Gary, let me just put on your Nostradamus cap. If you had to bet your house on the price of Beat Saber, what is the price going to be? In American dollars, we'll put it in American.
Yeah, well, if we go for dollars, I honestly think probably about $20. I think that's what I'd like to pay for it, but it could be more than that. It's perfectly viable that it would be more than that. Anthony, just quickly before you give your impressions on this, I was thinking about Racket NX the other day because I get a hankering to play that every now and again. Have you picked that game up yet at all? Because I know you were a big fan of the demo, but when it came out, it had a few problems and this kind of stuff. Have you picked that game up yet at all?
No, and I've seen it on sale a couple of times, and I thought about, man, that's a pretty good price. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I think it was on sale very recently, actually, and I was looking at it and some screenshots of it, and I was thinking, man, that really is a good game. Why have I never gone back to that? But for me, you know what it really is, Gary, is like, I mean, you know what it's like doing what we're doing. It's kind of the cult of the new. Jeff Kanata always talks about the cult of the new, newest, latest, best. Like he doesn't play old Super Mario games or whatever, he's always moving on to the future. And I kind of understand that, especially, well, we're in a in a kind of a interesting scenario because we have to if we keep playing games that came out 8 months ago, people are going to stop watching our shows, you know, because they're going to be like, yeah, that's great, but we want to hear some new stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I often think about Racket NX because I love the demo. Like you, I really did enjoy the demo. But I think maybe I should pick this game up now, especially like you say, it was in a sale recently. I was thinking maybe I should pick this game up because it gets a lot of love and it is a good game. You know, sometimes I talk about how games are sort of narrow in scope, like rhythm games, exactly like Beat Saber. But if they do something that I can just spend half an hour in, like Racket NX, or even this game Beat Saber, then I'm sort of up for that really as well.
Okay, let's see here. On the news front, I mean, we really only have one other little news topic, and this goes back to kind of like the Facebook controversy that has been going on over the last couple of months here, or well, it's been about a month and a half. I don't know how long it's been really, but all the Facebook Zuckerberg stuff, it's in the news every day. I'm going to send this over to Chris. Chris, I believe Chet Faliszek, formerly of Valve, I'm not sure who he's officially with now, but he kind of spoke out about Facebook and Oculus and privacy and stuff. Why don't you give us a quick little breakdown on what he's talking about?
Yeah, so he's basically just kind of roasting them for their data collection, you know, saying how they store all the movement and location of like the controllers, the headset, you know, and they could have the potential to track like all the communications within the service. Like none of this is, you know, forbidden or anything. The very open terms of service that really allows for anything. And then he just kind of went to talking about what Facebook has done in the past, how they have an advertising guy as the kind of the head of Oculus hardware instead of a hardware guy, you know, so he's kind of trying to imply that they have some bad intentions of just gathering data and trying to sell ads. And he also talks about how Facebook has, you know, been selling anti-Semitic ads. They've been selling ads towards depressed teens, basically just saying whatever they can make money off of, they will sell ads for. So that's kind of the gist of it. He's just saying Oculus is probably going to kind of be the next step of this in the future, with, you know, ads being like in your field of view or anything like that. So I think that's what he's saying. He's basically saying privacy is not happening in Oculus. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny because if we think back to that one scene in Ready Player One, and I'm guessing, Chris, you've finally seen it by now, right?
I need to see it this week. Yeah, no, I've been so busy.
God.
It sucks. Yeah.
Okay, well,
was it good? Did you guys like it? I can't watch the episode yet.
Yeah, we liked it. We
Good.
liked it.
Okay.
I'll spoil one tiny little scene, which is funny, and I mean, you might have already had it spoiled, but there's one little scene where they're talking about how they're putting advertising in like every viewable spot of, you know, in your VR headset, and they do you remember the line, Gary? It was pretty hilarious. It was something about
yeah, it was something like we believe we can fill their field of view, 80% of their field of view without them having seizures or something like that in terms of advertising. So yeah, it's something like that anyway.
I love it.
But that's kind of the future we're headed to. I mean, I forget, I saw this, somebody made a very interesting little movie where it was kind of this augmented reality dystopian nightmare. I don't know if you guys have heard of this or seen this. I caught it somewhere, but don't remember the name of it or who did it, but it looked really interesting where he was kind of going down that road and he was kind of looking maybe 15, 20 years into the future where you're wearing these augmented reality glasses and you're like walking down a regular street, you know, and it's kind of like that movie Minority Report, you know, when Tom Cruise was going through the subway or whatever, and he's looking at these billboards and it's like, hi, Dave Anderson or whatever his name was. I forget. It was something Anderson. And like he would look at every sign and it would register his pupils.
Yeah. And, there was, is this the video, like it was like a mock-up video of like augmented reality in the year 20 whatever it was? I remember seeing that. It was really, really cool actually, just to see it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they were talking about like advertising this kind of stuff, and you can definitely see it going in that direction.
But Gary, like if we were to get real here, because the thing is, when it comes to Oculus, we do have a bit of a political thing that's kind of bubbling under this. I mean, I don't even know if it's bubbling under the surface, but you have some people that simply will refuse to buy like an Oculus Rift because of Facebook and because of some of the things that they're doing. And then Chet Faliszek comes out and says that they're tracking our controllers and they're tracking where the headset is going. Is this something that concerns you personally, or do you feel like maybe everybody's doing the same thing and we're just hearing about Facebook? Or, I mean, how do you wrap your head around all of this stuff? Or do you just try to like not really think too much about it, and it's like, you know what, yeah, that's a political thing, I'm not going to get involved in that? I mean, how do you wrap your head around all this?
I think it's kind of like that quote in The Matrix, like ignorance is bliss. This guy who gets taken out of the Matrix and then he just wants to go back in. Honestly, I think the point is, look, Chet Faliszek, he's got all these views, and I think they're perfectly valid, because nobody wants their privacy invaded in any way. I just think that it's always going to be in the way it is in the modern world, and unfortunately, it's just an unfortunate truth. And you know, I don't know what else to say beyond that, because what he's saying is great, and it's sort of an ideology that I agree with. I don't think we should have this our privacy invaded to this extent, but the fact is that what we're hearing about all this stuff in the news from Facebook at the moment is the fact that they got caught. Nobody would know if it just carried on underneath the surface. And even now, we're getting reports of how every couple of days we're getting reports of how more people have been affected by this privacy issue within Facebook. So there's definitely concealing certain things, and this is something actually that on Voices of VR, Kent Byes is spoken about numerous times, and he's really not happy with the fact that Facebook, who own Oculus, are collecting as much data as they are from the Rift. So just to bring it back to VR in particular, I think that's valid, and it's a problem. I just think, at the end of the day, what do we do about it? What power do we have with this kind of stuff? And I wish we had more power. I wish there were things that we could do about it. And you could say, well, vote with your wallet. You know, don't buy an Oculus Rift. Don't be on Facebook and this kind of stuff. And that will work, but the effect that you have when it just has such a global majority of this kind of stuff, it's very difficult to see that from your personal point of view. It's like voting. You know, you don't want to you want to vote for the government in your country because you have an effect, and yet at the same time it's very difficult to see your own effect on that. So what do? We can only do what is available to us at the time, and it's unfortunate. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can kind of go off on a little quick rant on the whole privacy thing, because it's like, I don't know, man. I think it's the time that we're living in. You know, if we were living in the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, it's a different world. You actually had some privacy back then, but we're living in this technology-driven world, and there's so much technology everywhere that trying to have privacy is I think the only way you could really have privacy is if you just go completely off the grid. You move into the forest, you know, you build your own little log cabin, you have no cell phone, no internet, because otherwise, I mean, yeah, we can go down the debate of like, is this the way it should be? No, it shouldn't be this way, but I think it's like the cat is out of the bag. And I think it's kind of like the only thing I could hope for from a privacy standpoint is eventually I would have to imagine the government is going to have to get involved. And it's like we're about to get like Magic Leap 1 and stuff like this, and that has eye tracking, you know. So eye tracking is coming into the game pretty soon here, and they're going to know where our eyes are looking. They're going to know how many seconds our eyes are looking at that, how many seconds are, and then eventually I forget who it was, but somebody, I think it might have been Apple. They have some recent patents that have to do with your eyebrows and your facial structure to like see if you're smiling, if you're grinning, if you're frowning. It's gonna get it's gonna get much worse before it gets any better. But what I think is, from a government standpoint, what if they track every single thing that we do, but it's more anonymous? What if it was somehow more like your user 27815, you know what I mean? And they know, and so if they collect that data and they know what people tend to focus on, but they don't look at you as a specific individual, that would be kind of a good thing. But even then,
Yeah, I think that is what is happening now as well. But they also have the ability to sort of retroactively go back and trace that user down. And the problem is, how do you regulate that kind of stuff as well, to the point of where it has to be anonymous data, and that's okay. And I'm sure companies doing this, just collecting anonymous data because that's what they want to do. And you know, we live in a world where big data is probably one of the biggest commodities in the world at the moment. Companies like Google are surviving. Facebook and Google are surviving on this kind of commodity. So I struggle with it because I don't think it's going to change. And I want to be an advocate for privacy in all these big companies. I just don't know how far it can get when these companies have more power than some governments around the world.
Gary, we've watched too much Black Mirror. We already know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? But Chris, I want to ask you something, Chris, because I mean, you're very young, right? And so you've come into this world, like the second you came into this world, it was already going down this road. Me and Gary we existed in a world before a little bit that was, there actually might have been some actual legitimate privacy way back in the day, but the world you've existed in, privacy is pretty much non-existent. Has that colored your view towards this? I mean, are you just like, do you think your generation is just more acceptable of everything being tracked and it's just kind of, that's just the norm?
Yeah, I think no question about that. Most people I talk to about privacy or hear talk about privacy usually have that same opinion of like, oh, it's big data. Like, they're not personally tracking me. They're just trying to figure out what like the population does. And that's basically, you know, that's that. Most people aren't too upset by that. I know there's like certain professors at my school who are like super adamant about privacy, and they keep trying to like convert everyone to care about privacy. But in reality, most people would rather have the convenience of Google and Facebook and all these things than to have to use these really terrible services, like these terrible search engines that don't track you, that just, I don't know, like things are just way worse when there's not big data behind them, just because of AI and everything. So I think most people are just accepting that, you know, this is what the world is. And as long as it's not, I mean, no company cares what I'm doing, really. Like, they just care what everybody's doing. So I think that's how most people look at it in my generation. But it seems like most people, or like you guys both have that similar view too. So yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of thinking that.
Yeah, this is some, like, as more and more, especially with eye tracking, I think as eye tracking becomes more and more prevalent, which it's going to, it's something everybody's going to have to make a decision about this personally. Like, they're going to know, okay, this has eye tracking. I'm going to get a lot of great benefits out of this, but it's also going down that road as well. But why don't we go ahead and move on? And so we do have one topic that we wanted to get into briefly today, which is, so the Oculus Rift, it's been available for 2 years. The HTC Vive has been available now for 2 years. It just had its 2-year birthday just this week. PlayStation VR is a little bit later, October 13th, it'll have its 2-year birthday. But let's just think about PC VR gaming. So all of us have been in this PC VR gaming thing since pretty much the beginning, I think. I mean, I came in April 2016. Gary, I think you came in there. Chris, I'm not sure how early you might have been, even earlier than that, right? With DK2s and all that.
Yeah, I had Dev Kit 1, Dev Kit 2, and then I had the Rift. I'm like, man, I want motion controllers, so I bought a Vive, and then everything was pretty day one for me. Yeah.
So we've all been here for 2 years. So what I thought is we could kind of kind of reminisce maybe a little bit about these first 2 years and kind of where we thought it was going to go and some of the things like that. So why don't I start it off with this thought process of, okay, try to take yourself back 2 years ago and before these things arrived and think, where did you if you could go back 2 years ago to where you were, but you're thinking of 2 years in the future where it's going to be, are we actually where you thought we would be, or are we not far? We're nowhere near where you thought we would be, or I mean, if you kind of understand what I'm talking about, why don't I kick it over to Gary? Gary, you can try to answer this first.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and it's an interesting point to make because I guess before VR came out, like the consumer level VR, I'm not talking about DK2 or anything like that, but I'm talking about consumer level VR. Before that, we had heard from Oculus and from Valve and HTC that this will probably be a device that will be upgraded more or less in a parallel or slightly beyond a parallel to mobile phone technology. So you're thinking sort of three years maybe you'd get an upgrade. So I think taking that into account, we're pretty much where I expected us to be in terms of hardware at this point. But I will say I'm hoping for something to come out within the next 12 months or some kind of announcement within the next 12 months to say that this will be sort of some kind of upgrade. But overall, I'm showing a video at the moment of the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift trailers, the launch trailers. And it's interesting to go back to that kind of stuff because it's showing various things like green screen technology and budget cuts, just these people playing budget cuts and going into the blue, and just seeing all these things going back 2 years now. It doesn't feel like 2 years. It feels far sooner than that. It doesn't feel like that long ago. So I think we're pretty much where I expected us to be at this point. But I hope within the next 12 months to 24 months, we'll see some pretty big announcements from some other companies.
Chris, when you 2 years ago, let's just think about software for a second. Do you believe the things that you were imagining that would happen over, say, that next 2 year period, do you feel like the actual reality has met that, has surpassed that, or it's fallen short of that in terms of the games that you've gotten over these 2 years?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. Games like Lone Echo and Brass Tactics, I really love those games. So I feel like those have been on par with what I always hoped it would be. So we really had this indie wave for the first almost year. It was just all indie, all all too expensive. And then we kind of had this, amazing time where there's all these great releases. And I feel like we're kind of getting back to indie again because we're running out of, titles for now until game developers can make more. But I think back then I was really adamant on there being a better solution to locomotion by now than just thumbstick. I thought we would have figured it out. I thought there would have been some sort of omnidirectional treadmill or something that actually worked well, but I guess not yet. But when I set up my Vive first, I set it up in the biggest room scale configuration possible, and that was one of the coolest things ever, just having those track controllers and playing Tilt Brush for hours. It was just super fun. So I wish there was more room scale. I feel like my hope for that has died over these 2 years. I was a lot more excited about the possibilities of actually walking around a room than just sitting in the middle. But yeah, I think overall it kind of met my expectations in terms of software, with some being less, some being more like Lone Echo, things like that. I remember I was really disappointed with the consumer version originally of the Rift, because coming from the dev kit too, it was a tiny jump. It's probably the same jump from from the Vive to the Vive Pro or something. It's just because I remember all the interviews were wow, this is the same jump of the Dev Kit 1 to Dev Kit 2, which was massive. The Dev Kit 1 sucks compared to the Dev Kit 2. The screen is just terrible. So I remember for the first few weeks, I was man, should I just keep my Dev Kit 2? They're kind of similar until touch controllers and all that came out. That really changed it, I think. So
Did you because I did try the dev kit 2, but I didn't own one or anything like that, and there's only so much that you can take in when you're briefly trying these things. But a lot of what I saw when the CV1 first came out was a lot of people talking about like the God rays and this kind of stuff, and it's an annoyance of me even to this day. But did you notice that immediately? Was there any sort of going from the DK2 to the CV1? Was there anything in particular that you were disappointed about, or was it just sort of a very slight upgrade?
I was real disappointed with the lenses, because the lenses on the dev kit too were super nice. There were like really no God rays, and I don't know, for some reason my consumer version, like when it's black, it's never really pitch black anymore. Like it always has that kind of gray thing, whereas on the dev kit too, it was completely pitch black. Like the colors seemed a lot more vibrant on that. The first time I experienced presence was on the dev kit too. Like a real presence was when I was in the desk scene, and then I like had the camera set up and I like sat down and went under the desk, and I'm like, whoa, I'm under a desk, under my own desk. And it felt cool. So that was the first time I ever experienced that on the dev kit too. So I always have like a little space in my heart for that. But yeah, it was a downgrade in some ways, which was disappointing. But overall, it's an upgrade, especially with touch. Like if touch wasn't out, I would kind of be like, they're both similar, because, you know, as we know with the PSVR, you can have 1080p that looks pretty good. So yeah.
I can go back. I mean, one of the things I remember is when I first ordered my Vive, like at the time I was into retro gaming. I wasn't even playing modern gaming and stuff. And I had seen, I think it was like Mobile World Congress. It was like when all those videos came out, and you would see like the videos of them playing Zortex 26XX, you know, and the guys like, you know, going like this or whatever. And then, you know, the Arizona Sunshine, you know, those mixed reality video, the very first Vive commercial that they had with like Steam VR and all that. I think once I saw that commercial, I was like, and it was expensive, you know, buying a Vive back at that time, it seemed like a really expensive toy to try to screw around with. And I remember when I ordered it, I was like, you know what? F it. I'm just going to order this. And this may be the dumbest thing I've ever done, or this might be really cool. I don't know. And the other thing I was thinking way back then too was I actually had a lot of apprehension about going into for some reason. I was worried that VR was going to be so powerful and so like enveloping. Like, can I deal with this? Am I going to be able to hang with this? Is it going to be too overwhelming for me? You know? And it's funny because I meet a lot of people nowadays, especially older people, that I think they believe VR is way better than it really is, you know, and way more powerful than it really is. And they sometimes are apprehensive about even trying VR because they feel like they're going to step into a whole new world, and they're not going to know what to do. It's going to be like Ready Player One, and you know, we're not quite there. And then the other thing I'll mention real quick is, like, Chris, what you were talking about, it is kind of the death of room scale. And that is really sad to me, because way back in the very early Vive days, I remember that. I remember budget cuts, and I remember, I remember walking to the very edge of the play space. And nowadays, I've gotten so used to snap turning and free locomotion that I can just plant my feet in the middle of my play space, and with free locomotion and with snap turning, I basically don't have to move an inch, you know. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because it makes these games so playable that you can move around easily. It works good from that standpoint. You can play pretty much anything, and you can move around, and it works well. And the other huge benefit is you don't have to have a giant open space. But I also remember the days of unseen diplomacy, you know, and crawling on the ground and all of that. And so it's weird, you know, just looking back over these 2 years like that. But room scale has died a little bit. I guess one of the things that we can look forward to, though, is with Steam VR 2.0 and with the 4 lighthouses and the bigger expanded space, not so much for home use, but I think like arcade type stuff is really going to blow up with that. I think there's going to be a lot of cool experiences. Like, arcades are basically dead for the most part, but there could be a resurgence. Like, arcades could come back in a major way. We might not think of them like an arcade, you know, it's more of a modern day laser tag that's like on a whole new level. But Gary, why don't I kick it over to you? Is there any topic you wanted to get into in relation to the 2 years we've had PC VR gaming now for 2 years? Is there any other angle you want to approach this from real quick?
Not really. I think we've covered most of it. One thing that I thought was interesting that you were talking about earlier about how going into it, how it would be like this amazing experience and this kind of stuff. Because I sort of agree with that. You go into this thinking it, but you quickly see the limitations of what VR is at this time, and you adjust your perception of it. And the weird thing is, when you see people's first impressions of VR, you can read them all the time, and there will be people that are absolutely blown away by their first experience, and then there are other people that say, well, it's pixelated, it's blurry, and this kind of stuff. And I think the interesting point of that is the fact that the problems that people that are not quite so impressed about VR, they are problems that will very quickly be diminished over time, because we'll get high resolution screens, wider field of view, and this kind of stuff. So I think VR will only become more impressive for first time users as we go on. And so we're still in early days. We've got a situation at the moment where we've got enthusiasts that are going into VR, and they want to experience the most immersive way to play VR, play games or experiences in general. And they are sort of accommodating to that. I know I'm very accommodating to the limitations of VR at the moment. But as we get more into the mainstream, I think people want a more impressive experience. And, I can trace this back to demonstrating VR to my own parents, for example. They were impressed with it, but they did say, coming out of it, it's blurry and it's pixelated and this kind of stuff. So I think all of these problems are problems of the moment, and it doesn't bode to the point of, for example, like this will be a problem going forward. It will just be a problem for the moment, and as we get better technology, then all these problems will dissipate. But just finally, for the past 2 years, I'm so pleased I got in at the ground floor on consumer VR. In some ways I wish I'd joined when Chris did, with the DK1 and DK2, but at the same time I'm glad I got into it when I did, and I can't wait to see what comes for the next 2 years.
Alrighty, well, we can go ahead and get into game discussion now. Obviously, the biggest game release of this week, no question about it, Monday, Skyrim VR hit PC VR gaming. Oculus Rift gamers and HTC Vive gamers, Windows Mixed Reality as well. Everybody got their chance to jump into Skyrim VR. Of course, PlayStation VR had it last November, but we've all been playing the game this week. Why don't I go ahead and jump over to Chris? What are your thoughts on Skyrim?
I like it. It's cool because I haven't got to play it on PSVR, so it's like finally I get to play this game. I like it a lot more than Fallout 4. I just like the environments a lot more. It actually runs on my computer with like no lag right away. I opened it, getting 90 FPS the whole way, which is really nice. I'm not sure like the visual difference between the PSVR version and this one, but honestly, I was pretty impressed with the graphics personally. I know my girlfriend plays a lot of Skyrim. It's like one of her favorite games, and I had her go into it. She didn't really like the graphics too much compared to like a console version or something. I hope we get there. I need to check mods or something to like try to get those graphics to be better, but yeah.
Oh, dude, mods. People are raving about the mods. Like I have this one buddy. He is Erwin X. He used to be on Reddit all the time, but he's kind of disappeared. But he's running like 210 mods simultaneously
that's
on
crazy.
Skyrim.
Yeah, it's so cool that they just kind of work on there. Like I wasn't really expecting that, because I know in Fallout there's been some issues with that, I think. But it sounds like it's really plug and play. I mean, overall, I had a blast playing it so far. There's been a lot of weird bugs, though. Like my touch controllers, when I got to the character creation, just don't work. So I had to turn off the game, get a controller, do it with the controller, switch back to the touch controllers after another reboot. It's just kind of a hassle. I don't know what's up with that. It seems like it's only me and like a few other people having that problem. But I haven't really got to try out the controls too much. I think with the touch controllers, it's a lot better than the Vive ones, I'm sure. I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that compared to PSVR, though.
Gary?
Yeah, so last week we had a comment from somebody who was talking about Anthony's impressions of Wipeout and saying how he gushed over Wipeout. Well, this is my turn because I am going to gush over this game. This is absolutely fantastic. This is pretty much the definition of what I want in this generation of VR. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I've played a fair amount on PSVR as well. I say a fair amount, it's a fair amount for me. I've probably put in about 12 hours on PSVR, and it's great. There's nothing wrong with the PSVR version at all. I really enjoy it. But you have a few problems in terms of like the move controllers and also the resolution. Now, I think there's some kind of like threshold. I don't know if anybody sort of agrees with me on this point, but there's seems to be some kind of threshold in terms of immersion of how clear the image has to be in order for you to feel like you're actually within that world. And Fallout 4 really didn't achieve that. Like in the base Fallout 4, it didn't achieve that to the point where I felt like I was in that world. With a little bit of tweaking and that kind of stuff, I could get to that point. And there's a level of that with the PSVR version of Skyrim as well. I enjoy it and I think it's great. They've done such a good job on that. But with the PC, with the ability to ramp up super sampling, which is possibly the most important part for me, I think clarity in this world is more important than anything else. And I'll get onto mods a little bit late, well, just in a few minutes, but the point I want to make is whether you play it on base graphics or not, it doesn't really matter. As long as the clarity of the world is there, I think it reaches the threshold of you really believing that you're within this world. So yeah, Skyrim on the PC, and I'll admit, I'm playing on a high-end PC, so I'm ramping up the super sampling, and it gets to the point of this is the most immersed I've ever been in any VR game ever. So just to get onto the mods quickly, because I've not gone into them. I've gone onto like the 3D audio, and I've installed the 3D audio mod, which was one of the main ones. And I'm glad I've done that. I don't want to go into the mods, partly because I'm sort of a kind of a guy who is a little bit OCD about this kind of stuff. So I can see myself getting addicted to it and just not really playing the game, just installing all these mods and this kind of stuff. So I don't really want to go down that path. What I'm playing with the game at the moment is fantastic, and I'm enjoying it so much. I think this is what I wanted from Fallout 4 VR when it was released, and it didn't achieve it. With a little bit of tweaking, it did get there, but there was still this thing at the back of my mind thinking maybe I should tweak it a little bit more and get it even better. With this, I don't feel like that. I feel like I can just go in and enjoy the game. It's got plenty of options. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I'll say. The final point I'll make is just the fact that Fallout 4 was a bit of a disaster when it was first released. This has not been that. And I wonder, what teams have been developing these two separate games within Bethesda, because I think the team that has done Skyrim have done such a fantastic job compared to Fallout. And it's not to say that I'm disappointed with Fallout overall, but it's just to say that Skyrim is just a game that you can just go straight in there and enjoy, and it's fantastic.
I wonder what the difference really is, though, because like when I don't know, sometimes I'll be in Skyrim or Fallout, and I'll be walking through just like a wilderness area, right? Like in Fallout, there's some wilderness areas. There's no buildings for a while. You're walking in the wilderness, and there's sometimes I'm in Fallout and I'm walking in the wilderness, and I'm like, this could be Skyrim. You put a sword in my hand. This is Skyrim. It's funny. If you play both of those games back to back, you realize they're basically the same game. Yeah.
Yeah. Just quickly on that point, because I will say that I'm far more drawn towards, I'm far more of a sci-fi fan than I am a fantasy fan. So on paper, I should really be far more drawn towards the Fallout world than I am to Skyrim. But for some reason, I'm far more drawn to Skyrim. And I think it feels more like a living, breathing world. You've got like just the foliage and this kind of stuff. Fallout is a dead world. It's a setting of the game, so that's perfectly understandable. But with Skyrim, you feel like you're in a more of a living, breathing world, and it just appeals to me far more, even though it shouldn't on paper. It shouldn't, but I just want to spend far more of my time in Skyrim than I do in Fallout.
I wonder if it's also like, and from a performance standpoint, because Fallout, you know, it is guns and it's like it's projectiles, you know, and then it's lots of explosions and there's buildings and the geometry of it with like having a lot of buildings everywhere, you know, because of little cities and stuff. I wonder if that has a lot to do with the differences in performance, because in Skyrim, you don't have as many projectiles, you know, it's a lot of, I mean, well, you know, you're shooting bows and arrows and stuff too, and spells and stuff, but I don't know. I wonder if that had like the frame rate, if that has part of it, something to do with it.
I definitely think it does. But also, you know, this is the special edition of Skyrim that has been ported over. The original on PSVR, I believe it wasn't the special edition. It was just the base vanilla Skyrim that was ported over to VR. Whereas this version is actually the special edition. So you've got sort of better graphics within the game anyway as a base, which makes a difference. But also, I think in terms of like performance, it's still, you know, it's still an older game. They've got better textures and this kind of stuff, so they can do a lot more with the polygons that they use in this kind of stuff. But you know, just some of the effects on the magic and that kind of stuff, it's very impressive. And you know, in all honesty, even though this is an older game, I think this looks better than Fallout 4. Really, to me at least.
Yeah. Do you run it on like high or something? Because I'm running it on medium. I should probably try to bump it up. Do you know?
Yeah, I've got the base setting is on high, and then I'm super sampling it as well. And I'm willing to take a hit on in terms of like graphical fidelity, just to lower everything down if you can ramp up super sampling, because I think clarity is the biggest thing, at least for me. And you know, a lot of people probably won't agree with that, but I think clarity and like super sampling is the biggest difference in terms of immersion for me.
Mm-hmm. Man, I wish like either Gary or Steve or somebody that had like a 1080 Ti and all that stuff like lived like down the street from me, so I could drive over there. I want to see, you know, does it look that much different, or is it just a tiny difference? But when I first got this game Monday night, and when I first went in there, because I mean, I had been playing this on PlayStation VR like Gary for a while, and so it's like for a lot of Vive and Oculus owners, if you don't have a PSVR and you never played Skyrim when it came out last November, there's probably a lot more excitement and hype around this game, seeing it for the first time in VR. But for me, it was like, oh yeah, okay, Skyrim VR is now on PC VR. Okay, let me see how different it is compared to PSVR. And when I first fired it up Monday night, I was only in there for a little while, and you know, I went through the intro, you know, the normal intro that we all have to go through at the very beginning, and then I was in like Riverwood or whatever that first little town is, right? And I was looking around at everything, and I was like, this looks kind of drab and dreary. It doesn't look very colorful. It's not very, like, I was actually disappointed when I first saw it, and it turns out that it was simply like overcast and mist, and just the way it was in that little tiny area of but I was walking around, you know, I was going around to a lot of areas like right around there, but I guess I was just in this primarily overcast, like maybe a mist or whatever. And so I got this impression of it being kind of drab and dreary and like muted with the colors. And then the next day, because everybody was ranting and raving about how great it was. So I was like, well, everybody says it's so great. Even Gary, you remember I messaged you and I said, I'm not that impressed with this. And you were like, I'm the complete opposite. I'm loving it, you know? And so you said that, and I'm like, well, I got to get back in there and check it out some more. And then I got way the hell far away from where I was, and I got out into these open plains, and it was a crystal clear day, you know, sunny, no overcast. And it was colorful and bright and vibrant, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I was just in the bad area, basically.
There are things in this game as well that are slightly different in terms of like it being the special edition of the game, so it's got enhanced graphics compared to PSVR version. And I don't want to be the guy that says, you know, if you're playing the PSVR version, you're playing a downgraded version, because what they've got going on there is fantastic, and I loved my experience of playing Skyrim on PSVR. But with this is taking it, to me, it's a whole new level. The clarity and the fact that you've got motion controllers with the Vive or the Rift that respond the way you want them to respond, it takes it to a whole new level. But yeah, I think I mean, to me, this is pretty much, and I'm probably too early, it's only been playing for a week, but this is pretty much my favorite VR game so far, other than something like Elite Dangerous. It's Elite Dangerous, and this is all I want to play.
I get horrified by this game, just like the dragon's like too real, and I'm like, I don't know. I always get scared in these VR games. I don't know what it is about me, but even if it's not a horror game, I'm worried I'm gonna go in like some dark area and I'm just gonna be spooked. But that just shows how immersive it is, I guess.
Really is, yeah.
You know, Gary, one to be on the negative side, just briefly, is like, I mean, one of the things that still does bother me about Skyrim, and this bothered me on PSVR, and it's nothing against Bethesda, because they would have to completely rewrite the game from scratch, but it's the melee combat. So you have a sword in your hand, for example. Okay, so there's a wolf that's coming at you, right? And the wolves, there's a little bit of a scale thing too. It's like, I feel like the wolves should be, they need a mod where decrease wolf size by 15%, you know, and they probably have that too. But it's like a wolf is coming up at you or whatever it happens to be. And I feel like I take my sword and I just kind of go like this, you know what I mean? And it's like, does that, are you playing more as like a magic character, a bow character, or?
Yeah, I'm playing more as a magic character, and I will, you know, I should have said before, actually, this game is not without its problems. It's with several obvious problems, and that's in terms of the melee combat is not great. But you go into this, I went into this expecting that anyway. I think the melee combat in a lot of games is not particularly great anyway, so it doesn't really detract from my enjoyment of the game. The other major problem for me is the controls. Now, the controls are good, but they do have this thing where if you're playing with the Oculus Touch, you can be moving forward, and then if you look in different directions, down specifically or up, then all of a sudden you'll either stop or move backwards. It's sort of not tied to your head look, but it's also tied to it in some weird ways depending on the direction that you're looking. And it feels like a little bit like a remnant from the PSVR version, because, you know, if you push forward on the thumbstick of the Oculus Touch and then you twist your hand either side, you'll strafe. And you don't really want that to happen on the Oculus Touch. You want it to be whereas if you move the thumbstick either side, you'll strafe. But that's a remnant from the PSVR version where that will happen on the PSVR. And it works great on that, but on the Oculus Touch, I don't want it to work in that way. So I hope they patch a few things. I've got to be honest, you know, all of these, any problems that I have with this game are minor, and they don't detract from my enjoyment from it at all. Melee combat, just go back to your original point, Anthony, it is a problem. It's not perfect, and I don't think it will be perfect within this generation of VR. It's just, it is what it is, and it's a ported game, so we have to put up with it, unfortunately.
Do you think the next Bethesda game, whatever it is, well, no, actually, I guess I'll have to say the next Elder Scrolls game. Do you think the next Elder Scrolls game, do you think they have a team right now that is building a native VR version from a melee standpoint? Do you think we're going to get that 4 years from now, I guess?
Well, there was this thing. I was listening to the Split Screen, the Kotaku podcast, and they were talking about Todd Howard, where he was talking about how he hasn't even revealed any details to his own son about the next Elder Scrolls game. But we do know that this game is in development. So it only stands to reason that what they're doing with Fallout 4 and Skyrim, it seems to be that they're sort of experimenting with VR, and it would sort of imply that they will probably incorporate that into the next Fallout or Skyrim or Elder Scrolls game in some capacity. At least I would hope so. Now, whether it's got kind of like you say native VR support, I think the flat game will always be the primary concern for them. But whether they sort of release a VR version or not, it's a difficult question. I think what they've done, what they've proven is the fact that they are very enthusiastic about VR, and it bodes well for the next game that they release. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Did Chris, anything else to say about Skyrim, or?
I mean, not really. I do think it's better than Fallout, in my personal opinion, and I'm definitely going to be playing a lot more of it. I'm having a blast with it, so that's probably one of my top games right now. I like it a lot, but we'll see. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the next few weeks if there's anything comes up. But
okay. Well, one other game I can mention before we bounce out of here is Island Time VR, which is a new release this week. We also had Crisis on the Planet of the Apes. Didn't happen to play that, but Island Time VR came out this week, and this one is made by Flight School Studio. And one of the interesting things about this is, so you're basically on this little deserted island out, this little tropical island, but it's tiny. It is like super tiny. Like you're barely standing on the island. There isn't much of an island there. You can kind of walk around. It's almost like a little room scale thing because it's such a tiny little island. And there is a character on there called Carl the Crab, and he's kind of like your comedic sidekick character. And the interesting thing here is it's voiced by Greg Miller, where if you guys have seen, IGN, like he worked for IGN for probably like 10 years or something. I don't know how long it was. And then he left IGN and founded Kind of Funny Games. And so he's been doing the Kind of Funny Games thing, and they've had podcasts and they have video shows and all that. Greg Miller, very well known in the gaming community, not maybe the VR gaming community, but gaming overall. He does the voice of Carl the Crab. And I found this game enjoyable. It is a very limited experience, but it's $15. It's not trying to be everything, but basically what it is I got to be careful here with spoilers because I was talking about this on my other show and people complained about spoilers. So I'll try not to do the spoiler talk, but basically the idea is it's called Island Time VR. And what you're doing is you're trying to survive for as long as possible. You're trying to spend as much time on this island and conceivably maybe get off the island and get rescued or saved or whatever. But it's all about island time. You have a little watch that's on your wrist, and your watch has a health meter. It just has a heart, and then it has a running stopwatch time of how much time that you've spent. And so like when I first got into the game, maybe I was only lasting like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then I starved or something happened, I died, and then it's like, oh, okay, start over. And so lately I've been able to get to like 15 minutes, 18 minutes, last a lot longer. But basically what you have to do is you have to look around your limited island space, and you're crafting things. You find things on the ground, there's things in the water, and you kind of have to put two and two together and figure it out. And then Carl the Crab is there constantly talking to you. One of the things that you always worry too is when they get some type of celebrity or somebody to voice something, you always kind of worry if they're going to be out of their element, they're going to try to do way too much, or they're going to try to extend themselves. I actually feel like Greg Miller did a very good job with this. Like when I went into it, I was almost expecting to get turned off by it almost, because although I enjoy Greg Miller, he can be a bit over the top at times and can kind of grate. I mean, sometimes he might grate on you a little bit, but I think he did a damn good job. I really don't have much bad to say about the game. Really, the only negative I could say is it's just a very, very specific, limited experience. When we think about buying different games, sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to buy this game and it's going to keep me dialed like Skyrim. It's going to dial you in for a long time and it's just so meaty. This is more of a a palate cleansing type game, a change of pace where you can play it for a while, you can play it for a couple of afternoons, but it's not gonna, it's not gonna be a buffet basically.
Did you play it on Rift or PSVR? Because I think it's out on PSVR as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe it's on all of the headsets. I played it on Oculus Rift is the version that I played. But yeah, it works pretty good. I don't have any problems with it. Just relatively limited in its execution, but I mean, that's what it's trying to do. And then, did you guys have any other games you wanted to mention at all?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, one last thing, just real quick. Wipeout VR. I continue to just love this game. I mean, oh my goodness. But I mean, I said a million things about it last time. The only thing I was going to say about it this time is I keep going to new tracks or a track that I haven't gotten to yet. And I race through the track and I'm just dumbfounded, man. I'm just dumbfounded. It's I'm like, God damn, this is good. I mean, it is just so freaking good. I know it's just a racing game, and I've seen threads where people are like, what's so great about this? It's just a racing game. But man, the execution of it. One thing I found out, so Epos Game Studio or Game Studios is basically the main developer that converted Wipeout Omega Collection to VR. They were working with Clever Beans when they converted Wipeout 2048 and Wipeout HD to PS4. But then when they converted it to the VR version, I believe it was just Epos Game Studios. And it's five guys, I think in Sweden or something. And they just killed it. I mean, absolutely killed it. I hope these guys are working on another VR game because they know something that a lot of people don't know, because it just is so. One of the crazy things about Wipeout too is if you're this type of person where it's kind of man, what is it? It's hard to describe, but it's as you're going through the game, you get rewarded. You unlock new cars. It's just the little production. I don't know what it is. It's like that collect-a-thon thing. You're trying to always get a faster time, and then okay, you now unlocked this car. You now unlocked this skin for your HUD. They've got different HUD versions from Wipeout XL or all these different Wipeout versions over the years. You'll unlock these little bonuses, and there's something about that because back in the old flat gaming days, back when I used to play regular flat games, there's these little things that they do that are very addictive, and when we got to VR, a lot of that stuff kind of got flushed down the toilet, and it's almost like they're starting over from scratch in VR, and it's so much of it is first person and it doesn't really correlate. But going back to Wipeout VR and going through the menus and hitting the little buttons and just every little thing, it's just something magical about it.
It really is. And as much as I complain, because last time we spoke about this, I did complain about the kind of, it just being sort of narrow in scope. It's a racing game and it does what it does incredibly well, but it's just a racing game. But as much, I've gone back into there a couple of times now since I played that, and they've done such an amazing job on this. You're right, Anthony. It's got that little bit of, and I don't even know what it is. I can't even pinpoint what they're doing, but it's got that little bit of addictive nature to it where you just want to keep playing this. And I'm actually scared to let my son play it because I know he's going to get addicted to it. But yeah, fantastic. I absolutely love it. But yeah, it's a futuristic racing game and it does a fantastic job of it.
Absolutely. Alrighty, guys. Well, I guess that's pretty much going to wrap it up for episode 79 of our show. As we always like to do, please subscribe to our show, like the videos. iTunes reviews are great. And that's pretty much it, right? That's pretty much it. All right. We'll see everybody next week. Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.